Right, we've installed our PBX in a Flash, and now in this video we're going to configure a couple of extensions. Well, we'll configure maybe 5. Just show you how to do that now. We log in using the IP address that we chose on the last video when we set the static IP address, and we go down here. You see there's a button marked users, and that's the menu that normal users would get if they were configured as users on the system so they could log in, and we want the administrator panel, so we hit that button there and now it pops us up some more options, one of which is free PBX config administration. So we go into that, and now it wants our maintenance username and password, so it's maint and the password that you set in the second part of the PBX installation. That takes us in. Now I'm using Chrome here. If you didn't use Chrome, you would be prompted to install a Google Chrome plugin. Now that's all well and good, and you can do that if you choose to. Your only problem with that is once it's installed in your browser, be it Internet Explorer, I don't know if it is compatible with Firefox even, but if you install it in Internet Explorer, it stays in there. So this plugin applies itself to every site you visit from there on, so I personally don't want that, so I'm sticking with the Chrome browser instead. Now I'm just going to go into applications there and then extensions, and as you see on the top right hand corner there we've got add extension. We don't need that because we're already in the add an extension selection anyway. For a one-off extension, passwords are really important, and that's not for the one-off extension, it's full stop. The amount of PBXs we get where clients don't secure them properly and they get hacked because they've chosen weak passwords is unbelievable. It's nearly always the case with most of the compromises we come across. We find client extensions where they've been set to silly things like 1, 2, 3, 4. We do actually, if we configure them, we set at secure passwords, but people are doing this for convenience. Don't do it. With this, the board we're installing here, it shouldn't really be too much of a problem because we're not exposing it to the internet. But you may do later to remote extensions. So from the outset, make sure your passwords are secure. And for that, rather than, what I find is that it's actually more of a pain trying to choose a random password. So I use the bitmil random password generator, and we can go there. There it is, bitmil, and I'll just choose a length of 10. Now, when you generate the passwords, free PBX will complain it needs to have 2 numbers, at least 2 numbers and 2 letters, which as you can see it's not here. So I'll just make sure I can generate one here that's got 2 numbers and 2 letters in. That's fine, we'll use that one. So I'll copy that, and then let's go and create our extensions. So we want to add a generic SIP device. It's just going to be a IP phone, and we'll just call this extension 100, and we'll put in there, say Darren. Now, the number alias, it's for really SIP to SIP dialing. This sorry, no, this is not for SIP to SIP dialing. This one, what's this one for? It's the masquerade as different use. Now, what this is commonly used for, this is only used internally, the SIP alias, but what it actually does is, say you had a group, say support, we may assign an extension at a later date when we're doing ring groups and things like that to support. So we had extension 500 assigned to support. What we would want is, when we're doing internal calls, we might want to present that number 500, the support number, to anyone we dial. And this is where you do that. We can say we want our, if you like, our outbound caller ID, but only for internal use at 500, and this is where you'd set it. SIP alias is for when you're doing SIP to SIP dialing, and you can create one there. The outbound caller ID, this is quite an important one for you. The outbound caller ID, which we're not going to fill in here, is where you'd set your actual public number. You may have, say, a group of number for us. Say you've had 10 numbers from us. You can assign a number to each of those 10 extensions, and this is where you'd set it. Now, what you can do for more advanced things, and if it's going to be a VoIP thing, as well as a number, you can have it pass a name. In this case, it might be a personal name or the company name or whatever. So it takes this format here, and then you put the number 0161 710 2180, and that's what the format that you would take with that. You don't have to do that. You can just put the number in without all that fancy stuff, but all it ever passes is the number. And currently, the amount of people you're going to come across using SIP, it doesn't matter, but it's a good practice to start with. The ring time is what you'd expect. It's the time that it rings, the phone rings, before it goes to voicemail or whatever other thing it does to process the call after that. And it's the same with call forwarding. When it's forwarding a call, how long it rings before it goes to what it does after that, like voicemail or whatever it may be. Now, another little feature here is the outbound concurrency limit. And what that is it's the limit of concurrent calls that can be made using this extension. Sounds like you just leave that at no limit and it doesn't really matter. Again, for your own security, set it to 1. It's unlikely that you're going to make 2 outbound calls from the same phone using the same trunk, so make sure it's 1. And that means that if your extension ever did get compromised and someone managed to log their own phone in using the username and password, they wouldn't be able to batter it with 1,000 calls to Sierra Leone or something. They'd only be limited to that 1 call. And that can make a big difference in case of any hacks. Call waiting, as you may imagine, it's just the standard call waiting you might get on a PSTN line. I find that many users don't like this. I'll disable it because they get a beeping when they're on a call. They can't usually drop the call and take it, so for the majority of users you will want this disabled. I use it personally and I have mine enabled, but most users don't like it and disable it. Auto answer, that's for when you've got the extension hooked up to some sort of paging equipment. And that's where you can actually have it, a PA system, and so you dial up an internal number, say extension 600, and then you can page over your internal intercom system. Call screening is again something that's rarely used, and what that does is it makes, before you're handed the call over, your extension will ring, you pick it up, and they will have had to give their name, the caller. So call comes in and he gets a voice message saying please tell your name, and then when the call gets handed to you, it tells you who's calling first, so you can choose to reject it or accept it. Again, something that in practice we never see used very much at all. Pinless dialing is when you may have, for outbound traffic, a PIN number. Again, very rarely used, but what this means is that at the configuration stage you can override it, so this particular user would not need to enter a PIN number for the outbound dialing. Emergency SID, emergency caller ID, that's the caller ID that if you dial any emergency services you want presented out, and that'll be the one where it's registered to your address, blah blah blah, and they actually get through to the right people, then they can identify you. Queue state detection, that's an advanced feature used in queuing. We won't go into that at the moment, we'll deal with all that in another video. Assigned DID and SID, you can ignore that here, that's not really something you'll need to use here. Your inbound DIDs will be set in our inbound routes anyway. The next one is the device options, and this device uses SIP technology. It's saying, well, we chose a SIP device, so we knew that, and this is where we paste in our password, the secret. DTF mode, leave it to, with most devices they will support RFC 2833, and that's to do with the tones when you press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. during a call, and menu options handles things like that. The NAT setting, at the moment we're going to make an assumption here that you're using your switchboard within your firewall, so this is a setting for local users. So being as your PBX is going to be inside your local area network, you do not need to use NAT here, so it will be set to no. In a later video we will use this for maybe remote extensions, so you may have a teleworker at home and they might be coming through to you by NAT. They're sat behind a NAT device and we will have to deal with that NAT, and this is the option we will set here. In older versions of Asterisk and free PBX, by default this was set to yes, but the newer versions have now set it to no. Right, moving on, call camp services. Again, something we're not gonna go into here. We will do it at a later date. But what this is to do with, it's the same sort of thing you have on your PSTN BT line, and I think BT call it call return, and it's to do with when you dial a number and it's engaged, you can just forget it, put your phone down, and it will ring you back when the people are off the phone. Dictation service, as you might imagine, that's exactly what it is. There is a feature code, and you can dial that in, so you can actually type in a number, maybe *64 I think it may be, and then you can actually dictate down to that, and it'll record that and tag it into an email and email it you as a file, so you could email it to a secretary or whatever. Language code, if it had multiple languages installed, you could put the language code in here, and any menus, etc., any voice prompts that this extension will get would be in that particular language. Then we go on to our recording options, and they're pretty self-explanatory there, whether you want to enable them, disable them, whether they can have on-demand recording, etc., etc. Voicemail will be disabled by default. We're going to enable that just simply because I want to use the voicemail to deal with some inbound calls in some videos going down the line from here. So I'm just going to set the voicemail password at 12345, something I do not recommend you do under any circumstances, because again, at a later date we may allow people to do fancy things with their voicemail from outside of the system. They could be calling in from their mobile, or maybe their home, and what they can do is then, instead of just once they go through to the voicemail, their own voicemail, they can choose things like to hit the hash key, enter a password, and they're into the mailbox. Doesn't sound a big issue, but you've got options where you can set forwarding, so again, an attacker who compromised your mailbox could then start forwarding calls to your mailbox to Sierra Leone. So then they just dial your inbound DID. Instead of going through to your voicemail, it forwards it to an external high rate international number. Quite a common attack, that. Right, the next part is your email address for that. You can actually have voice notifications when you've got a voicemail. Very handy, and the same with the pager. The pager, I think it just sends a summary saying you've got an email, whereas the email address is one where you can actually add attachments, and it will actually attach the WAV file to the email and send it to you. It may actually do it in MP3 now to make it a smaller file. Either way, they're not very big because it's only low bandwidth anyway, telephony, but it will attach the voicemail to the email and send it to you. Voicemail options, there's extra little things you can do, and the context, just leave that at default. The VMX locator is a quite advanced thing that I personally haven't used yet, but again, for the purposes of training videos, I'm going to actually look at it and see how it works properly. But what it is, it's like you have your own little IVR for your extension. For those of you who don't know what IVR is, it's the interactive voice response menu. You'll know that when you go through to many companies, you know, press 1 for sales, 2 for customer services, etc., etc. You can have little menus here like that are just for this extension, and it may be to call my cell phone, press 1, to go to my voicemail, press 2, or other options. And below that you've got the optional destination, so it can actually handle things in different ways depending on the state of the phone when the call comes in. I.e. no answer, it can do one thing. Busy, it can do another. And if you're not reachable, i.e. your extension is not registered or something like that, it can do yet another thing. So it's not just a simple case of one voicemail and that's it, like you do with a normal, say, home telephone service. It's actually very flexible. So I'll hit the submit there, and that's added our device over on the side there, 100. Now normally I would have to click the apply config button, but I'm just going to do them in a batch there, so I'll stay with the add extension. I'll do a 101, I'm not going to mess about. We'll use display name 101 just the same. We can go and add these as we need them. Back to my bitmail random password generator, generate another one that's got 2 numbers and 2 letters in. That one looks good to me, and in we go. All we've got to do is add the secret. We'll leave the voicemail off on the other ones, we don't need it. Submit and OK. Again, it's popped it up. 102, 102. Back to our random password generator, generate another one. 2 numbers, nope. Oh yeah, it did. There's 2 numbers and 2 letters. The punctuation's handy. It allows you to add that extra layer of security again to your extensions, and that's why I leave it on. There's 3, so let's add another 2 more. 103, 103. Back to the bitmail. Generate the passwords. Oops. Add the secret. One more. So this has given us 5 extensions to play with. And I tend to find that if I'm doing them in bulk, this is the easiest way to do them. Just get them on the system first and then come back later and refine them. We can add our fancy bells and whistles. Where's that secret gone? And now hit the apply config, and there we have our 5 extensions. I get to get back to the root menu on this that gives us a status. And there we should see somewhere IP phones online. It doesn't show us how many are configured on that, but that's how to add an extension to free PBX. Once you've got your extensions in there like that, you can then go and alter them as you wish at a later date. Over on the right hand side there, go into 100. What you'll often see there is they've got some other options that weren't there when we first created it. And again, we will go and we'll look into all those different options at a later date. Many of them are to do with codecs, host dynamic. I'm not going to go through the whole list here. But this is where you could have, it means it needs a username and password. You don't have to use the username and password. You could have an IP address in here, but the phone would have to keep that IP address then. We'll go into all this in much more depth in other videos. But that is essentially how to set up 5 extensions on your PBX. In the next video, I'm going to attach a SIP phone to one of them extensions so we can start doing some other stuff with it. See you in the next video.